Got yourself a fancy camera, yep, and you want to learn a bit more about it. Fundamentally, your camera is trying to balance everything out to 50% grey. So it looks at highlights, lowers those, looks at shadows, raises those, and everything is just all leveled out. If you leave your camera in auto, it'll take a snapshot, it'll balance it all out, it'll be correctly exposed, and you'll get a reasonable picture. But the thing is, the art of photography is so much more than that. It's all about control. It's about you using the camera as a tool to create the picture that you want, not what the camera thinks, right, is the optimum. Come on, this way. Get a bit keen running in fields, this one. Come on, out of there. And the way your camera takes its pictures on auto mode is it measures everything and balances it all in relation to the exposure triangle. Now the exposure triangle, by its name, is three components: shutter speed, aperture and ISO. And we'll deal with those individually. Shutter speed, freezing motion or capturing motion. Aperture we use for the depth of field, so how much of your image you want in focus. This action camera I'm using at the moment has a set aperture, a set field of view, so everything you can see behind me is in focus. Yeah. Well, again, artistically and creatively, we might want to change that, but if your camera's in auto mode, you can't do it because it's always trying to level everything. Hey, this way! Hey! This way! It's always trying to balance everything in a nice safe shot. There's no deviation from the algorithm. It says, no, if you're this, we need to be this, and we'll do that. So with aperture, if we use aperture creatively, we can create a very shallow depth of field, which will give you a nice artistic picture. And basically the subject, in this frame me, will be in focus, nice and sharp, but everything else in front or behind me will be blurred. And that's how you draw the viewer's attention to the subject of your picture. Conversely, if you want a nice landscape shot, like this vista of Bolton, for example, you need a very wide plane of focus, or a wide depth of field. Let's try and keep the terms simple. So you need a very deep depth of field. We use that by using a small aperture, which inversely has a big f number, so something like f11. You've got pretty much everything in focus: the foreground, the background, and the middle ground, or subject. Right, anyway, I don't know where we're up to. Aperture, yeah, using it creatively. So a small aperture, lots of things in focus. Big aperture, not much in focus. Get good separation from your subject and the background. Now the strange thing with aperture is it's a load of random numbers. Really, I mean they're not random, but when you first look at them you're like, what on earth is this? But basically it's the opposite of what you want. So if you want a big aperture, you need a small f number. So f1.4, yeah, is pretty much in the mainstream the biggest aperture you can get. If you get some specialist lenses, you can get them down to 0.95, they're about £8 each, or you can have a 1.2 in there, like, so big money too. But a 1.4 will give you a very, very good separation. Now if you want a landscape, or if you want everything in focus, then we go for a small aperture, and that's a big number. So like I say, f8 to f11, dog! f8 to f11 is pretty much the sweet spot for you know, everything being in focus, and you can go all the way up to f22 in the main. f16 or f22 is the oh, my dog, what are you doing? What's the state of this thing here? So yeah, f16, f22 is generally the upper end of your most common lenses. If you hear the term a fast lens, that generally means it's got a bigger maximum aperture. A really fast lens would be f1.2. A fast lens is anything about 2 or below, f2 or below. Yeah, your most common pro lenses have a maximum aperture of f2.8. That's generally considered to be like the most commonly used or most common speed of a fast lens. You get variable aperture lenses. I'm going to tie this dog up here. I won't really. Variable aperture, yeah. So if you get a third party lens like a Sigma or a Tamron or stuff like that, very good lenses these days, but some of them, like certainly the bigger lenses, unless you want to spend like 10, 12, 15,000 pounds on a single lens, you're going to end up with what's called a variable aperture. And that means, so say on my Sigma 150-600 Contemporary, yeah, brilliant lens, a little bit softer at 600mm sometimes, but it has a variable aperture of 5.6 to 6.3. Basically to do with the amount of light that it can let in at any one point. So when it's zoomed out at 150mm, the aperture, the minimum aperture, or the biggest aperture you can get, will be 5.6. When you zoom in all the way up to 600mm, the biggest aperture you can have is 6.3. So it's great, but when you come to low light and stuff, that's when it starts to struggle. And I think really that's where the third part comes in, the ISO, which is another word for gain, really. In the olden days we had film, and you had to buy your film before you went out, so you choose it according to what you were planning to shoot. If you're going outside in the sunshine, you get ISO 100 film or ASA 100 film. If it's a cloudy day, you go for 200 or 400 film. Dog's pulling me down a steep hill at the moment. So yeah, 200 to 400 ISO film. Grey rainy day like we get 300 days a year in Manchester, you go for ISO 800. And it was set then, there's nothing you could do about it. Other than changing the shutter and aperture to compensate for it. But nowadays, modern cameras, ISO can go all the way up to, well, I think the latest D6 is coming out with 102,400 or something, which is a lot of ISO. Base ISO, I'm just coming up to a waterfall now. Base ISO is the lowest standard ISO you can have for your camera. So most cameras it's either 100, or if you've got a bit of an older camera it'd be 200. Some of the more advanced ones will go down to 64 or even 50. But basically that low ISO means that that is the base level that the sensor can measure at. The screen's gone off now. There we go. So for the least noise, the least grain, the least interference or distortion, or however you want to describe it, yeah, you want to keep your ISO as low as you can. Nowadays, I mean, I'm quite happy shooting up to 12,800 or maybe 16,000 at a real push. I mean, you're looking really at black and white pictures by that point. But it's better to have your pictures in focus and the action frozen and cope with a bit of noise and a bit of grain than to have blurry photos that are out of focus, or you know, people are moving in them when you want them frozen, rather than having a bit of noise and no noise. Yep. So let's get a bit of B-roll while we're here. Dog's going for it up the 63 steps, I think it's called. I'm not, I'm going this way. So yeah, ISO. It's great because it can bring in, give you a bit of a boost of light if you're struggling for some. Come on! Oh, it never stops that long. Right, where are we? Yeah, ISO. It's a bit of a boost really. Well, the more you boost it, the more noise and grain you can introduce into your photos. But really, the three parts of the triangle, shutter speed, aperture and ISO, all balance each other out. So if you want to control the shutter speed, if you want to slow your shutter speed down, because you're in the dark for example, then you boost your aperture up, or you boost your ISO up. If you want a nice wide aperture, doing a fancy portrait in bright sunlight, you're going to have to speed your shutter up, so otherwise you get an overexposed picture. And if you slowed your shutter down as fast as you, as slow as you can, and if you've opened the aperture as wide as you can, and it's still too dark, it's still underexposed, then you boost your ISO. Auto ISO is a great feature because it'll do a lot of the hard work for you. You can set an upper and lower limit, and there's dog found now. You can set an upper and lower limit, and it'll always try and find the lowest possible ISO value for you to keep the noise down. So it's pretty handy. And that, I think, take 507 is the exposure triangle. Oh, so we can get a picture of this. Right, bear with me. Right, now this could be the most stupidest thing I've ever done, because I'm going to just dip this in the water. It's meant to be waterproof. Everything's closed. And let's have a look. Good luck, everybody. Yay! How about that? Have a look what it looks like. I'm impressed. Let's do it again. Is it nice?